this is Deboki, and today I'm going to be reviewing Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. This is a YA fantasy story set on the island of Fenburn, where in each generation of royalty there is basically born a set of female triplets, and each of the sisters has one of three magical abilities. She is either the poisoner queen, who can ingest any poison, a naturalist queen who can control plants and animals, or an elemental queen who's basically like the Avatar. Like, she can control the elements and all that jazz. So at a young age, these three queens are separated onto different parts of the island and raised and kind of brought up to know how to wield their power and all that stuff. And on their 16th birthday, they are then brought back together, where they have to kill each other, and whoever survives becomes the next queen. At the start of this book, a poisoner queen is sat on the throne for several generations, and we are following the current set of triplets who are about to hit their 16th birthday and come together and try to battle it out. I've never really gotten into Kendare Blake's books, but I do love fantasy books with a ton of political intrigue. So when I saw this book getting reviewed around BookTube, I decided to give it a try. I especially love a book with not just one, but three female main characters who have their own kind of distinct friendships and worlds and all of like this mythology to them. And that is a thing that made the book fun to read. Each of the sisters really has her own distinct world that's built around her, and I really felt like Blake did a good job building out the individual circles that they're growing up in to illustrate the different forces at play trying to make them queen. In the sense, there is quite a bit of intrigue going on, especially because stories of one of the queen's exceptional abilities are being spread around the island while the other two queens struggle to keep up. The different queens are also subject to their own kind of education, and I thought the society and lessons that Catherine, the poisoner queen, were subject to were especially fascinating because it's just so unique. You see a lot of, like, you know, naturalist kind of magic and elementalist kind of magic in a lot of different fantasy worlds, but something like a poisoner queen who can ingest any poison, that's not something you see in a lot of books. Within all of this, there are also suitors and pseudo-suitors who bring their own motivations into the mix, and there's also temples and political groups that have their own incentives that seem to constantly be at odds. In between, we occasionally get glimpses of the mythology underlying this tradition, primarily focused around the way that queens in the past have risen to power. These different aspects of the book hint at a really compelling world and a cast of characters who are dealing with an intersection of magical ability, political shenanigans, and romance. Unfortunately for me, hint kind of felt like as far as this book really got. The book felt ultimately, at most, like it wanted to deal with these different aspects of the story and the world building at the most surface level that it could get away with. There's really no explanation for why this method of choosing a queen exists, or really even a complete illustration of how this kind of political system works. At most, we get some references to a council and the fact that the naturalists and the elementalists are a bit tired of how much power the poisoners have wielded, but like, why? Is it because they're poisoners, or are they bad? Like, has the government been corrupted? Is it, I don't know. Like, how is this a remotely stable form of government? It was just a lot of questions that the book didn't even seem to think people would consider. The killing between the sisters is supposed to start at the Beltane festival, and throughout the book we know that there are events called like the quickening and the disembarking, and we know that they're important because they're capitalized, but it's never completely clear to me what they are or how they work. So even though you hear them all the time and you know they're big, until they happen, they just kind of seem like these weird phantom events. This felt like a book where someone took the message of show, don't tell a little bit too far. Like, yeah, you don't want to lay out every single detail about the society like it's a Wikipedia entry, but you need to give some explanation of how things work to establish different characters' motivations and provide some context for their actions. So, you know, like in the Hunger Games, there's that handy explanation video from the Capitol that's basically a huge chunk of exposition to explain why Pan Am is the way that it is. If you take that out of the book, you're left with a book about a society that just throws kids into an arena to kill each other for no apparent reason. And you can make that work if you're writing Battle Royale and you provide other details like the relationships between the kids and the adults and their pasts. and you really make that the central aspect of the story instead of asking what type of government would do such a thing. But that's not what Three Dark Crowns does. It still wants you to be interested in the politics of the world, except that there's not much to know about that, except that there's a political council and a temple that are at odds. When the politics are ambiguous, the intrigue is as well. If you don't explain why the world is the way that it is, or what the sisters might feel about growing up in a world where they're being raised to kill each other, or even why they might want to be queen, there's no real sense of stakes except that each sister wants to survive. But even that sentiment isn't really kind of explored in a meaningful way. Moreover, while there are a lot of relationships that should be compelling, the book's shallow exploration of them made me just as bored as the political intrigue. It's a guy who's supposed to help her be attractive to potential suitors. They make out, they fall in love, and that really felt like the extent of their relationship. We don't have any reason for why they like each other, but we know that they do because they say that they do. This is where some of that showing instead of telling could have come into play. There's also a love triangle that was interesting to me for about a second, because instead of a girl caught between two guys, it's a guy caught between two girls. And there seems to be magical forces at play, so that adds another layer of tension. Except those magical forces, it kind of starts to feel like a weird cosmic date rapey situation, because both of the parties involved seem to be having different understanding of what's happening, and consent is really confusing in the situation. And beyond being weirded out by how that plays out, I just didn't care. The moment this love triangle was basically initiated, I started to feel deflated because it didn't seem to serve any purpose except to set one strong character against another. And theoretically, in a book about three magical sisters who are brought up to kill each other, you shouldn't need a haphazard love triangle to kind of set things off. The last few pages of the book did carry quite a bit of action, as well as a twist that I did not see coming. The strength of those last few scenes were maybe just enough to keep me interested in reading future books, as well as the hope that those future books might kind of build out the world and fill in a lot of the blanks for how this government and even these characters operate. But overall, I did come out of the book feeling disappointed that such a strong premise was not built out into what was, to me, a more compelling plot. I'm interested in hearing other people's opinions because I know some people loved it. Based on Goodreads, it seems like some people kind of have the same feelings that I did. So feel free to tell me why you did or did not like this book, or if you're planning to read it. And bye.